Chapter 5, The Fire That Does Not Warm. A complete unveiling of Bhairavi, the fifth Mahavidya. There is a goddess who arrives, not as darkness, but as light, so fierce it blinds. She does not hide in shadows. She is the shadow cast by 10,000 suns rising at once. She does not whisper. She roars in frequencies that shatter the eardrum of the ego before the mind can process the sound. She is Bhairavi, the fifth Mahavidya, and she is not the goddess of destruction. She is the destruction that happens in the moment of revelation, the fire that does not warm, but burns away the capacity to feel warmth. The radiance that reveals the one who sought illumination was the last thing that needed to be seen through. To speak of Bhairavi is to speak with a mouth already scorched. To see her is to see the flash that precedes the annihilation, the brilliance that arrives before the darkness and proves the darkness was never separate from it. She is a Kadvam, made blinding, Agor that does not need to be terrible because its beauty is the most terrible thing in existence, a non-dual truth wearing the face of the sun, so that only the one who can look directly into it without eyes will recognize her. The name that eats fear, Bhairavi, means she who inspires terror, she who is fierce, she who is beyond fear itself. The root is Bhai, fear, and the name is the fear that has been consumed, digested, transformed into the power that uses fear as fuel. She's terrifying, not because she threatens, but because she reveals that the one who feared was never real, that the self that trembled was a temporary gathering of conditions, that the terror was the ego's last defense against the recognition of its own impermanence. She is called Tripura Bhairavi, the fierce one of the three cities, and these three cities are not fortresses of stone. They are the three states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, deep sleep. And the three bodies: physical, subtle, causal. And the three worlds: material, astral, spiritual. She is the terror that burns through all three simultaneously, not sequentially, not patiently, but in a single flash of recognition that the one who moved through these states was never separate from the states themselves. The name is also derived from Bharana, to create, Ramana, to protect, and Vamana, to disgorge or destroy. This is the complete cycle in one syllable: creation, maintenance, and destruction. Not as three acts, but as one continuous breathing of the cosmos. She creates by illuminating, maintains by burning, destroys by radiating so intensely that the forms cannot sustain their separation from the light. She is the fire that cooks the universe, the heat that transforms the raw into the cooked, the tapas that is not asceticism but ardor, the passion that consumes all secondary interests and attachments until only the primary remains, the body that is radiance. Her complexion is the color of the rising sun, or red as the fire itself, or golden as the light of pure consciousness made flesh. This is not the color of any particular mood or time. It is the color of Tejas, the resplendence that is the light of awareness itself, the illumination by which all things are known, and which, when intensified, dissolves the knower into the knowing. She has 3 eyes, and these are the sun, the moon, and the fire of knowledge. The same 3 eyes, Kali and Tripura Sundari, because they are the same vision in different intensities. But in Bhairavi, the fire eye dominates. The sun eye sees the manifest. The moon eye sees the subtle. The fire eye burns through both. It is the vision that does not merely perceive, but incinerates the perceived. That does not merely witness, but transforms the witnessed into the same light that witnesses it. She wears a diadem of rare gems, shaped as the crescent moon. And this moon is the mind that waxes and wanes, but is always connected to the whole. The reminder that even the changing mind is held in the embrace of the unchanging. That the gems are not decoration. They are the concentrated light of consciousness, the facets of truth that catch her own radiance and reflect it back, intensify. The prisms that prove white light was never separate from the colors it contains. Her face is as beautiful as a full-blown lotus, with kind eyes and a smiling disposition. And this is the most terrible thing about her. She does not scowl. She smiles. She does not threaten. She welcomes. And in that welcome is the recognition that the one who approaches her will be consumed. Not as punishment, but as hospitality. Not as cruelty, but as the only honest treatment of a guest who is actually the host wearing a costume of visitation. Her smile is the smile of the fire that does not know it burns. The warmth that does not know it destroys. The kindness that kills by revealing that the one who sought kindness was never separate from the kindness itself. Her breasts are smeared with blood, and this blood is not the blood of enemies. It is her own blood, the life force that is being pushed to the surface by the intensity of her burning. The nectar that rises when the inner fire is stoked to the point where the body cannot contain it and must release it through the skin. The blood-smeared breast is the teaching that nourishment and destruction are the same, that the milk that feeds and the blood that wounds are the same substance seen from different stages of intensity, that the mother who gives life and the warrior who takes it are the same goddess wearing different postures for the play. The 4 arms that burn and bless. In one hand she holds the sword of knowledge, the same sword as Kali and Tara, because it is the same truth in different grip. But in Bhairavi's hand, the sword is not merely the severer of illusion. It is the igniter of transformation, the blade that cuts not to separate, but to cauterize, not to wound, but to seal the wound with fire, not to kill, but to burn the death into life so completely that the distinction between them dissolves in the flash of the stroke. In another hand she holds the demon's head, the severed ego, the same head that Kali holds, because it is the same teaching. But in Bhairavi's hand, the head is not merely the trophy of completed discrimination. It is the fuel for the fire, the offering that has been transformed into the same light that consumed it, the proof that the demon of ego, when burned completely, becomes the radiance that illuminates the path for others. In her third hand she holds the rosary, the mala, And this is the devotion that has survived the burning, the prayer that has been scorched into purity, a repetition that has been reduced to its essence by the fire that removes all that is not essential. The rosary is not the tool of the beginner. It is the instrument of the one who has burned through the need for tools, and now uses them only as reminders of what has been completed. In her fourth hand she holds the book, and this book is not scripture in the ordinary sense. It is the book of destruction, the manual of dissolution, the text that records not how to build, but how to burn, not how to live, but how to die completely, so that living becomes possible without the one who lived. The book is the teaching that knowledge, when complete, becomes the knowledge of how to release knowledge, the wisdom that knows its own end, the scripture that concludes with the instruction to burn the scripture. Her other hands, when not holding sword and head, display the Abhaya Mudra and the Vara Mudra, the gestures of fearlessness and boon granting. These are not contradictions. They are the two faces of fire, the face that burns and the face that warms, the aspect that destroys and the aspect that transforms, the gesture that says, "Have no fear, because the one who feared has been burned," and the gesture that says, "Take this boon, because the boon is the burning itself, the garlands that prove the burning." She wears a garland of human heads, freshly cut with blood dripping, mixed with a garland of red flowers reaching up to her feet. This is not decoration. This is documentation. Each head is a completed burning, an ego that has been illuminated to death, a self that has been radiated into non-existence. The blood dripping is the proof that the cutting was recent, that the burning continues. The fire does not rest. The red flowers mixed with the heads are the teaching that beauty and destruction are the same garland, that the lotus that blooms and the head that bleeds are the same substance wearing different stages of transformation. She wears a girdle of severed hands linked by bones, and these are the hands that once grasped, once reached, once tried to hold what cannot be held. When the hands are severed and worn around the waist, the teaching is clear. The doing that grasped is now the done that decorates. The reaching that sought is now the reached that displays. The hands that once tried to possess are now the belt that holds the fire in place without constraint. The seat that is the corpse of the witness, she sits upon a lotus, or upon a corpse, or upon the heart of Sadashiva, who is shown laughing. And these are not different seats, but the same seat seen from different stages of recognition. The lotus is the seat of purity, a flower that rises from the mud without being stained, the proof that radiance can emerge from Maya without being diminished by it. The corpse is the seat of completion, the body that has been burned completely and now rests as the foundation for the fire that continues. Sadashiva laughing is the seat of the witness who has seen the burning and knows it is play. The consciousness that has recognized the destruction as its own act, and therefore laughs at the drama of fear and hope that preceded it. In some depictions, she stands upon a preta, a ghost, who lies upon the back of 4 other pretas, who lie upon a corpse that is Sadashiva. This is the hierarchy of dissolution. The individual ghost upon the collective ghosts, upon the universal corpse, upon the eternal consciousness. She stands at the top, not as conqueror, but as the one who has climbed the ladder of burning, and now stands upon the highest rung, the final form, the last illusion, the ultimate ego that must be burned for the burning to be complete. The fire that is Tapas Bhairavi is the goddess of tapas, and tapas is not asceticism. It is ardor, the flame of enthusiasm, the heat of passion directed toward the divine, the fire that consumes all secondary interests and attachments until only the primary remains. Tapas is the self-awareness of the Absolute that results in the transmutation of that force into energized action. The Chid Agni, the fire of consciousness that is aflame in every being, directing all outward actions and inward thoughts, the working of the mind and the organs and the tissues and the cells. On the cosmic level, this Agni is the driving force of all gods, the intermediary between man and deity, the vehicle that carries the offerings to the gods and returns with the fruits, the Jata Vedase that knows all births and therefore knows all deaths. Bhairavi is the Shakti of Jata Vedase, the power behind the vehicle, the energy that drives the fire, that drives the world. She is not the fire, she is the power of the fire, the potential that makes the actual possible, the tapas that becomes tejas, the ardor that becomes radiant. She is also the goddess of decay, and this decay is not corruption. It is the natural process by which the old becomes fuel for the new. The body that weakens and ages and dies and becomes ash, that becomes soil, that becomes seed, that becomes body again. She is present in every decline, every weakening, every loss of semen that drains the male, every angry word that burns a bridge, every jealous glance that consumes the one who casts it. She is not the cause of decay. She is the decay itself, the process that proves all forms are temporary. The transformation that reveals permanence was never the property of any form. The Kundalini that she is Bhairavi dwells in the Muladhara, the root chakra, and she is the Kundalini itself, the coiled serpent waiting to rise, the fire at the base of the spine that does not warm the body but transforms it. Where other goddesses gently coax the serpent awake, Bhairavi ignites it. She forces the rise through the power of her own burning, through the intensity of her tapas, through the ferocity of her tejas that will not wait for readiness but demands transformation now. The three phases of her Kundalini awakening are Jivalana, the ignition, when the base grows hot and the dormant fire stirs, Dahana, the burning. When the rising fire consumes the blockages of each chakra and manifests as emotional release, physical kriyas, psychological death, and dipti, the radiance. When what survives the burning shines as purified conduit for divine consciousness, the seeker transformed, not improved, but made transparent. This is not gentle yoga. This is the fire that does not ask permission. This is the Kundalini that rises not as serpent, but as flame. Not as coil, but as explosion. Not as awakening, but as ignition. It leaves the old self as ash and the new self as light. The 12 forms that cover all transformation. She has 12 forms, each a different face of the same burning. Sampak Prada Bhairavi, who grants well. Sakala Siddhi Bhairavi, who grants all perfections. Bhaya Vinashini Bhairavi, who destroys fear. Chaitanya Bhairavi, who awakens divine consciousness. Bhuvaneshwari Bhairavi, who rules space. Kameshwari Bhairavi, who grants desires. Annapurneshwari Bhairavi, who provides sustenance. Nitya Bhairavi, who is eternal. Rudra Bhairavi, who is fierce. Bhadra Bhairavi, who is auspicious. Subhamkari Bhairavi, who does good. And Smashana Bhairavi, who dwells in the cremation ground. Each form is the same fire wearing different temperatures for different purposes. The fire that warms is the same fire that burns. The fire that cooks is the same fire that destroys. The fire that illuminates is the same fire that blinds. The difference is not in the fire, but in the distance from it. Not in Bhairavi, but in the one who approaches her and what they have brought to be burned. The Agor of radiance Bhairavi is Agor, not in her darkness, but in her light. Not in her hiding, but in her revealing. Not in her terror, but in her beauty. That is the most terrifying thing, because it cannot be looked at directly without the death of the one who looks. She is the Agor of the sun, the fierce compassion that does not soothe but scorches, that does not heal but cauterizes, that does not comfort but transforms by the intensity of its presence. She is the Agor of the inner fire, the tapas that burns in the belly of the yogi who has stopped eating comfort and started consuming truth, the tejas that radiates from the skin of the one who has become so bright that others must look away or be blinded. She is the Agor of the cremation ground at midday, when the sun is highest and the pyres burn hottest, and the smoke rises straight up without bending, the moment when the burning is most complete, and the transformation most honest, how to worship her. The worship of Bhairavi is entirely tantric, and it must be undertaken under the guidance of a guru who has walked through the fire and emerged as light, who belongs to a parampara where this form of Mahashakti has been worshipped, transmitted through the bodies of those who have been burned and reborn as radiance. The central practice is the repetition of her mantra, the three seeds that vibrate the fire at the root and carry it upward. Shraim, Shkrim, Esrau. These are not words. They are the sounds of ignition, the frequencies of burning, the vibrations that transform the cells into conductors of light. The mantra is offered not with the anxiety of the one who needs, but with the heat of the one who is already burning. Not with the desperation of the seeker, but with the ardor of the one who has recognized that seeking is the fuel, and the finding is the fire. Offerings include red hibiscus, the flower that bleeds color, that stains the fingers, that refuses to be pretty without leaving its mark. Meat and wine are offered in her tantric worship, not for gratification, but for transgression, for the breaking of the taboo that separates the worshipper from the worshipped, for the recognition that the pure and the impure are her two hands, and both are burned by the same fire. The 5 M's are practiced: Matsya, Mamsa, Mudra, Madhya, Maithuna, not as indulgence, but as the offering of the 5 senses into the fire of consciousness, the transformation of the 5 elements into the one element that is their source. Fire rituals are conducted with ghee and black sesame, the clarified consciousness that burns without residue, the seeds of karma that are offered into the fire of transformation. The fire is her mouth, and the offerings are her food. And the devotee who places the offering into the fire is placing it into her radiance, which is the same as placing it into their own radiance, which is the same as recognizing that radiance and offering and fire and devotee were never separate. The meditation of the rising flame, the meditation upon Bhairavi, begins with the visualization of the fire at the root, the Muladhara, the coiled serpent that she ignites with her presence. The practitioner feels the heat rise, not as metaphor, but as actual temperature, the spine growing warm, the chakras opening not as flowers, but as vents for the flame must pass through. The practitioner then visualizes Bhairavi herself, golden, radiant, 3-eyed, blood-smeared, smiling, seated upon the corpse of the witness, holding sword and head and rosary and book, wearing skulls and flowers, radiating the light of 10,000 suns. But this visualization is not a meeting with an external deity. It is the recognition of the deity as the practitioner's own deepest nature, the part of the self that has always been fire because it was never cooled by experience, the part that has always been radiance because it was never dimmed by thought, the part that has always been burning because it was never extinguished by the fear of burning. What she does for the devotee. For the devotee who approaches her with the courage of the one who is willing to burn, Bhairavi bestows blessings that scorch before they heal, that blind before they illuminate, that destroy before they create. She grants the destruction of fear, and this destruction is not the absence of danger. It is the presence of fire so intense that danger is consumed before it can threaten. The radiance that burns the concept of threat into ash. The light that reveals the one who feared was never separate from the fear itself and therefore could never be harmed by it. She grants the power of tapas, and this power is not the ability to endure suffering. It is the ability to transform suffering into fuel, to burn the obstacle into the energy that overcomes it, to consume the blockage into the passage that opens through it. The tapas she grants is the fire that does not need to be stoked because it is self-sustaining, the ardor that does not need to be encouraged because it is its own encouragement, the passion that consumes all secondary interests, because it recognizes the primary interest as itself. She grants the awakening of Kundalini, and this awakening is not the gentle rise of the serpent. It is the explosive ignition of the flame, the forced ascent that burns through every chakra without asking permission. The transformation that happens not gradually, but in the flash of recognition, that the serpent was always fire, and the coil was always explosion waiting to happen. She grants the removal of obstacles, and this removal is not the clearing of the path. It is the burning of the path itself, the revelation that the obstacle and the way around it are the same substance, and both are consumed by the same fire. The recognition that the path and the obstruction and the one who walks were never three, but one continuous act of burning. She grants spiritual awakening, and this awakening is not the acquisition of knowledge, It is the incineration of the knower, the radiating of the head that believed it could know, a flash of light that reveals knowledge and ignorance as the two shadows cast by the same fire. And the fire is the only reality, and the awakening she grants is the awakening from the dream of awakening, and the realization that the one who sought realization was the last fuel to be burned, a final ego to be radiated, the ultimate illusion to be illuminated into non-existence. She grants the vision of the universal form, the Visvarupa, the boundless form with arms and eyes and mouths and bellies without end, the form in which worlds are born and sustained and destroyed in the same flash of perception, the form that Arjuna saw and could not bear and begged to be released from, a form that is the truth behind all personal forms, the radiance that dissolves the individual into the universal, the ultimate teaching. Bhairavi as Ekattva, in the highest understanding. Bhairavi is not a goddess with 4 arms and 3 eyes, seated on a corpse, holding a sword and a head and a rosary and a book, wearing skulls and flowers, radiating 10,000 suns. She is the recognition that the arms and the eyes and the corpse and the sword and the head and the rosary and the book and the skulls and the flowers and the suns, and the one who radiates, the one who is radiated upon, are all the same. She is the Ekattvam that illuminates, to reveal there was never anything to illuminate, the oneness that burns to show there was never anything separate to burn, the truth that radiates to demonstrate that radiance was never separate from the darkness it dissolves. The devotee who has received her gifts does not become a devotee. The devotee becomes Bhairavi, becomes the fire, becomes the tapas, becomes the tejas, becomes the sword and the head and the rosary and the book and the skulls and the flowers and the suns and the radiance and the burning and the transformation and the ash that remains and the light that rises from the ash and the recognition that ash and light were never separate. This is the 5th Mahavidya. This is Ma Bhairavi. This is the fire that does not warm, the radiance that blinds, the beauty that kills by revealing, the terror that liberates by consuming, the tapas that is ardor, not asceticism, the tejas that is resplendence, not decoration, the kundalini that ignites rather than rises, the destruction that is creation seen from the other side of the flame, the decay that is transformation wearing its honest face, the light of 10,000 suns that proves the night was always day waiting to happen, the smile that welcomes the devotee into the burning, the gesture that grants fearlessness by removing the one who feared, the book that teaches by instructing its own burning, the sword that cuts by cauterizing, the head that is held as proof that the ego was never separate from the hand that holds it, the Ekattvam made blinding, the Agor made radiant, the non-dual truth wearing the face of the sun, so that only the one who can look without eyes will see her, and in that seeing become her, and in that becoming discover that there was never any becoming, only the fire that was always burning, always burning, always burning without fuel, because the fuel was always the fire. Fire was always the fuel, and the one who watched the burning was the burning itself, the light of consciousness that consumes itself to illuminate itself, the Bhairavi that was never separate from the Bhairava, that was never separate from the one who called her name, And in that calling became the name, the fire, the light, the radiance, and the darkness that proves the light was never absent, only waiting for the eyes to burn, so that the seeing could begin. That is the complete chapter 5, Bhairavi, the fifth Mahavidya.